Hello, I'm Martin Lowe from CGTN, and this is my colleague
Yuan.
We're on top of an open deck tram in the centre of Hong Kong. We're going to have a ride through the city and we're going to see some of the sights. What are you looking forward to?
I'm actually very happy.
Shopping?
No, I'm not a big shopaholic. I'm just, because these trams are probably the only things that are slow in Hong Kong, right? It's such a fast-paced society.
They're slow, but the good thing is they've got their own rails.
Yeah.
So they don't very often get caught in traffic.
Yeah.
Sometimes somebody will drive in front of them and obstruct them, and they shouldn't do that. And they do sometimes, but then the driver will ding ding, and of course ding ding, that's what they're called.
Yeah, in Chinese, these trams are actually called ding ding che, which is ding ding bus, after the sound they make.
I think it's great. So almost universally, people don't say, "Are you going to catch a tram?" They say, "I'm coming on the ding ding." Are you going on the ding ding? I mean, it's a great name.
That's a lovely word.
It's a lovely word.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Causeway Bay. This is where the tour starts, and this is one of the main shopping areas of Hong Kong. Now, everybody knows that Hong Kong is famous for its shopping. Here, they've got everything. They've got everything from high street stores right the way up to designer labels. And if you go down the side streets, there are lots and lots of tiny little fascinating small shops. In fact, it's such a popular area that the shops here are open till midnight every day. And there is a local saying, they say that if shopping was a sport, this in Causeway Bay would be the Olympic Games. I don't know how anybody can afford to live here.
You know what, my colleague just did a story about people living in the so-called coffin rooms.
Oh yeah, what about those? And the nap flats.
Yeah, even for that small coffin room, you have to pay like 2,800 Hong Kong dollars, which is like 400 US dollars a month.
You know, I read something just a couple of days ago. They said a lot of their apartments are only 14 square meters, which seems incredibly small. But even more than that, there's a developer currently who's put in plans to convert a building into a number of even smaller apartments. These are the ones they call gnat flats or mosquito flats. And on the plans, they're only 5.7 square meters per accommodation. Unbelievable. Anyway, so this area, which now is the shopping area, originally this actually was a fishing village, and before all of this development, it was just a small beach with local fishing boats and local fishermen who would bring the catch in here. And I don't think we're actually going to see them from the top of this open top tram. But there are a couple of reminders of those days. There is a typhoon shelter here because this is an area which is prone to fierce storms, and there's also a temple, and in days gone by the fishermen would go to the temple and they would pray for good weather and safe passage and a lot of fish before they went out to sea. And then if the worst happened, then of course they had to turn their boats around and come back. Then also on the shoreline here there was a typhoon shelter where they could go inside and take cover from the worst. the old days, the drivers who worked for this tram line didn't ever get a lunch break, and they had something called red light meals, and it's more or less what you'd expect. They would bring food with them, and then as they were driving along, every time they stopped at a red traffic light, they'd have a little nibble of their meal, and then of course when the lights turned to green, they'd have to drive off again. But over the course of a few stops, that was how they would have their food. There's Times Square. There's the big but yeah, so those red light meals were famous because that's how the drivers sustained themselves during their working day. But of course, more recently, in perhaps more enlightened times, they do now get a lunch break like everybody else. So it's not too busy, is it? It's the middle of the afternoon.
It's a Monday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean a bit later on we'll be picking up the beginning of the rush hour, the evening rush. But this is quite a good time to get.
I'm looking forward to this tram passing by neon lights, just in the neon lights of Hong Kong.
Yeah, of course that's one of the things that Hong Kong's famous for.
Yeah.
I guess better still after dark, but we'll certainly see them. The weather's always a bit of a surprise, isn't it? I mean, I've packed sunglasses, but also an umbrella, and it's been cloudy for the last 10 or 12 days now. But so far, so good. It's holding out for us. I think over here, this is the peak. This mountain. That is the highest point. Yeah, that's the highest point anywhere in Hong Kong. It's not that high, but it's about 400 meters. And they say everybody, if they can, should wait to watch it go up. So there you get the best views of anywhere in Hong Kong. I haven't done it yet, but it's not as daunting as it sounds. Oh, you have? Did you go to Tram? There's a funicular railway. Did you go on the railway?
No, it's a cab.
No, I didn't know there was a road. I think it'd be great to go on the funicular railway, which is one of those mountain railways. Yes, there's a really speedy.
I wish it was that, but we went late at night and we got a bird's eye view of the whole city lit up at night. It's really beautiful.
You got some comments?
My producer just handed us a phone, and they wanted us to look at the comments and perhaps answer some questions that our viewers have.
Well, a lot of the comments are saying how lovely it is, and that's certainly true. I mean, Hong Kong is one of the world's great cities.
Right.
It's got a fascinating history, but it's also hugely impressive when you're here in person. And of course, you see the size. It's obviously a small island, and that's the defining feature about Hong Kong, and always has been. Because it has such a small, round area, that's why it has so many tall buildings.
You know what
This is interesting. We're now coming into Happy Valley, which is an area that a lot of people have heard of. Happy Valley, there's a horse racing course,
Right.
Which is very famous. But there's also a slightly more macabre story about Happy Valley. It's such a lovely, happy-sounding name, but in fact, if you look around here in Happy Valley, you'll see that there are no fewer than 6 cemeteries. And it turns out that Happy Valley was a euphemism for land where the dead were buried. And the reason that was the case was that into the Second World War, the British Army came here for the first time in 1940. Here in Happy Valley was where they got their very first army camp, because it was a flat land at the base of the hills. But unfortunately, because it was so flat, it was a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and it became very bad. There was an outbreak of malaria, and lots of soldiers and lots of civilians who were involved with them died from malaria, and that's why it became traditional to bury people here, and that has now expanded. And as I say, there are 6 different cemeteries, lots of them for different religious backgrounds, but they're all in this same general area. So a lovely name, but not quite such a lovely story.
But Happy Valley today is really known for the horse races, right? Have you seen one?
I haven't seen one, but just over there, just the other side, this is the Happy Valley Sports and it started a fire. And obviously in those days everything was built with wood, and this fire was very, very fierce. The road only burned for a relatively short time, about 20 minutes, before they managed to bring it under control. During that short period, 600 people were killed, 600 people lost their lives in the fire, and to this day it remains one of the worst fire tragedies ever in Hong Kong. Wow. I know they say that there's never any need to run or to... in England, again, where I originally come from, you run for a bus because you might have to wait anything between 20 and 40 minutes to an hour for the next one.
Right.
But here, literally, there is another one along any minute. There are so many trams, and it's such a great way to get about, and it's so cheap.
Yeah. So I was just saying, more than 160 trams, probably the largest tram fleet in the world.
Do you know, it's certainly got the largest number of double-decker trams anywhere in the world these days.
Exactly.
There was a time when lots of countries had this form of transport, but they've all taken them away. But I guess it's ideal for such a small, confined area like this. Obviously, because it's a small area, there's lots of cars, there's lots of traffic, and there are a lot of delays. But if you can get on one of these trams, most of the time you can just rattle along on the metal rails.
Right. They say it's the most reliable way of getting around in Hong Kong. And these things have been around for, what, more than a century? 110 years?
1904,
yeah.
I think they started, and they were all, the trams, all of the parts to build the trams were actually constructed in the United Kingdom. Obviously in those days this was a British colony.
But I think everything now is Hong Kong made.
Oh yeah,
everything.
But even in those, even that long ago, right from the beginning, all of those parts were brought here by ship, and they were always assembled here in Hong Kong. So they were always Hong Kong trams, but they did have British parts. And I think this is, I'm not sure about this, but I think this is the last remaining place where there is actually a tram factory where they build trams still, because there is that huge fleet.
Right, I think so. I think the newest models are like made in 2000. Somewhere around that time.
Because this is a special one. This is an open top tram.
This is a tram for tourists.
Yeah, this gives you a chance.
Open deck tram.
Yeah, this gives you a chance to go around and you know, risk the weather, but at least you get a chance to see everything and you can look around. But yes, the standard trams, the ones in front of us, they are so cheap. And we talked about this briefly, but it's a flat fare of $2.30. That's Hong Kong
like
dollars.
a few US cents.
Yeah, it's 30 cents. It's about a third of a US dollar, and that's the same price whether you travel one stop or whether you go from one side of the island to the other.
So flattering.
Yeah, brilliant.
But this one that we're on right now, like you said before, it's a tram for tourists. This one's a bit more pricey. This is a lot more work.
Yeah, this is 95 Hong Kong dollars, and that's about $12.5 US dollars, but it's definitely worth it. It's a very, very good way to see the city, and there's information available on board. People, you can find out what the various sites are. This is a great introduction to the city if you're a first-time visitor like I am.
And this whole trip takes about an hour?
It takes about an hour, yes, I understand, yes.
Yeah. And it passes through all the landmarks in the city, most of the landmarks in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah, well, I guess not everything, but you certainly get off the tram, I think, knowing a lot more than when you got on.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, we talked about ding ding, which is the universal name. Well, exactly. We seem to be in a bit of a queue, but there is a little bit of ding ding going on. Ding ding is also the name of a local delicacy, a candy, a sweet.
Oh really? Oh,
I'm not sure, but I think it's because it comes in a long roll.
Right.
And the confectioner.
It's sticky, right?
Yeah, but the confectioner chops it into small pieces to give you a small piece each. And they say that the sound of this knife as it hits the chopping board is ding 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 ding. So there are two ding dings here in Hong Kong. while we're waiting, and we're surrounded by trams. When they first introduced trams here, there were two classes, first class and third class. Strangely, there was never a second class, but obviously first class was for the gentlemen and the officers and the people who ran the island, and the third class was for the ordinary citizens. And they didn't mix. There were different trams. There were first class trams and third class trams, and you had to wait for whichever one suited your status in life. And then a bit later on, they amalgamated them, and they made where we are now. They made the top deck first class, and below stairs was third class. And for some of the gentry, that was a little bit too close. They didn't want to be rubbing shoulders with people who perhaps served them in their homes. So then they had a fascinating idea. They constructed trailers, and the tram would pull a trailer behind it, and the trailer would be the first class accommodation. So the third class people would be here, the trailer would be behind, and obviously much more luxurious. I'm not sure if food or drink was available, but certainly much more of luxurious accommodation. But then, of course, as time moved forward, that was abolished. Now they're all single class, and we all travel together, and we all share everything together.
A lot of cities got rid of their tram system in the 1950s and replaced them with buses and cars, right? And then in the 1970s, they started rebuilding the city's tram system. But Hong Kong is really different. I mean, these things have been around for more than 100 years. They have been here through good times and bad times. They've been through everything with the city.
Yeah, well, cities have started to reintroduce them as an environmentally form of transport. But here in Hong Kong, they've always been environmentally friendly. Even back right at the beginning in 1904, they were never powered by coal or steam or even pulled along by horses. They've always been electric, right from the very moment they started. They were electric 110 years ago, and they're still electric now. So a very environmentally friendly way of getting around this city. Getting around. We're not getting around.
We're not getting around.
But we have time.
I wonder what's happening.
We have time to sit still and smell the
Can I just go
smell the coffee. Okay, soon it's going to be obviously the celebration, the 20th anniversary of the return of Hong Kong to China after something like 150 years of British administration here. And of course, you know, the British did a lot, to be honest. There are lots of signs here of when the British were in control. A lot of the road names have got British names, the road layout, governments, local government law. These are all British introductions, but we shouldn't forget the contributions that China made to the development of global society. China invented a lot of things. China invented fireworks, and of course fireworks. There's going to be a huge fireworks display to mark the celebrations. I'm not sure if it's the night of June the 30th or if it's the next day, July the 11th, but it would make sense to have them at night when it's dark so you can see them better. But yeah, so fireworks was a Chinese invention. Now we're moving. One other thing that China invented, paper money. For centuries people carried around coins or tokens, and then the Chinese invented paper money. When it was first invented, it was commonly called a flying money, because after so long of people having coins, suddenly they got paper. It was flying out of their hands when it was windy and disappearing. So people were losing their money, but they called it flying money, but they soon learned to keep a tight grip on it.
I was just at a history museum a few days ago, and I saw the notes from
They were huge. Yeah. Well, because they were a sign of status.
Yeah.
If you had paper money, you were a rich person. I mean, much like now, but much more so in those days. And so it was big, and it was a sign of your ability to pay for things.
The museum that I went to, that I just mentioned, is actually right on the border of Hong Kong and Shenzhen. The name of the street is actually called Chongqing Street, which means China England Street.
Oh, wow.
Translated.
Really?
It's like a 4-meter wide street, and the boundary stones are like right in the middle of that street.
Well, that's great. You see, that's a perfect example of cooperation between nations. And obviously cooperation between Britain and China came to a fore when the agreement was reached that after this period that it was under British administration, it was always a temporary thing. It was for the first 50 years or so, it was fairly informal. Then a 99-year lease was signed, and at the end of it, there was some discussion. Was it going to remain under British control? But no, it went quickly back into the. It was agreed that it could be returned to China in 1997. Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of the UK, who agreed to that honouring of that agreement, and of course, that's what we're now celebrating the 20th anniversary of.
The tram line is still 700 metres inland. This is all land that used to be underwater but has now been reclaimed and built upon. At the main convention centre, where most of the celebrations are going to be taking place for the Handover anniversary, that actually juts out even further. And from the seaward end of the convention centre, it's a full kilometre back inland to the tram line. You have to say the door.
So close to the tram ahead of us. I just want to show our audience the little number on the top corner of the tram. Can you see a 135? That's the tram number right there. My favorite one is the 120. That's the one that's completely green.
Oh, are the colors significant?
No, I just like the old green one because it's one of the oldest ones.
It looks traditional, vintage.
It looks vintage, and all of its seats are made of bamboo. And apparently there's only one person left in the entire tram company that knows how to make those kind of seats.
Wow. Yeah, we need to preserve these old skills, don't we? I mean, that's great. But I mean, bamboo furniture. I guess he can make bamboo furniture even if he can't make a full-time living making them for the trams.
Speaking of which, the art of making neon lights is also dying.
Neon lights?
Yes.
Ah, but here they're so popular.
Yeah.
Actually, we're now coming into a street This is a road where nearly all of the lighting shops in the city are concentrated. They seem to have different districts for different specialities, and this is the lighting shop. You can come here for any kind of light for your home or for your office or for a hotel. This is where everybody comes to get their lights.
You're watching CGTN. We're live for you in Hong Kong. We're on board Hong Kong's iconic tram.
We're in the general area of a district that's known as Admiralty. Obviously it's called Admiralty because back in the 1850s this is where the British Royal Navy came and made their headquarters. Although foreigners like me call it by its English name of Admiralty, locally in Chinese it's known as Kamchung, and that's a very popular area. That's a busy area.
Golden clock, I believe. Kamchung. My Cantonese is so bad.
I'm sure you know better than me. There are some of the neon signs
that
you were talking about. But yes, after dark, I mean, Hong Kong just lights up, doesn't it? It comes alive. And of course, the most famous view of all of Hong Kong is the one that you take from the other side of the water, from Kowloon side, looking back at Hong Kong Island. And that's where all of the big tall skyscrapers are. They're illuminated at night. I think 8 o'clock every night they have a light show, lasers and flashing lights, and it really is very, very spectacular. You mentioned this before about there are so many skyscrapers here, and it's true, I think, that there are more skyscrapers here in Hong Kong, very, very tall, thin buildings, than anywhere else in the world. 30% more even than New York, and twice as many as in Dubai.
But it's these back alleyways that really give the city its character. I love these alleyways. You can find almost everything.
Yeah, I mean, the back alleyways are great. And of course, probably, I don't know, 100 years ago to as recently as 40 or 50 years ago, Hong Kong was one of the main centres in the entire world for making toys. And toys there were lots and lots of small workshops in these small side streets and alleyways. And they used to churn out literally hundreds of thousands, probably millions of small toys. They were inexpensive. They were known worldwide. Every time you bought a toy anywhere in the world, it would almost certainly have "Made in Hong Kong" stamped on the bottom. And this was a place where you could manufacture things cheaply. I don't think it's the case anymore. And we've had globalization, and you know, these small industries have gone. But there are still the workshops aren't making those toys anymore. But in the side streets, there are still museums. There are still small shops that display toys, as they used to be, and there are certainly museums which tell the story of Hong Kong's fame as a toy manufacturer.
The tram ahead of us is almost full, and it's not yet rush hour. They transport apparently 200,000 passengers every day, these trams.
Wow, 200,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And exactly, so imagine if they weren't here, all of those people would be in ordinary cars or on the roads, and it would make the traffic problems even worse, wouldn't it? So this is a vital thing, really, a vital service for Hong Kong. I hope they don't phase it out. Do you think they're going to keep the trams forever? I don't know.
Well, this company is not funded by the government at all, and given its low fare, it's really struggling to keep its head above water, I guess.
Yeah, but we'd hope it remains, because it is vital. It's such an important asset, really, to allow you to get around. Where are we now? Is there a road?
Let me put on the audio guide and see if we can find out.
I think we're approaching the financial district.
Is this your first time in Hong Kong?
It is my first time in Hong Kong.
Second time.
Yeah. Now we've got a green light at the moment, but we're still not moving. Maybe, it's a stop. Tin Lock Lane. It's a tram stop. A little bit of rain, but nothing really that's a problem, just a few spots. This morning it was very hot. This afternoon a little bit cloudy.
Look at this apartment. This is not something that you typically associate with Hong Kong, is it?
The high tenement and lots of people living closely together.
But I guess this is one of the good ones, right?
Yeah. But everybody, as you mentioned this already, but everybody has to live in such tiny apartments here, because the land is at such a premium, there's such a demand for it. But every street you turn down is fascinating in its own way. There's always something to look at here, isn't there? Chinese signs everywhere, of course.
I know a photographer in Hong Kong who likes to take photos of these tenements, and when he takes photos, he would just take a portion of this building, so like a couple of windows, so you don't know how wide it is, you don't know how tall it is. It just makes you think, doesn't it? You don't know what's going on inside. It's such a glamorous city on the outside, but people are living in such tiny apartments.
Yes, and I think there is quite a tradition here because of that people try to spend as much time out of their apartments as they can. I know people like to spend time with their friends, they like to spend time in shopping malls.
Or just at work.
Well, yeah.
And workaholics.
Yeah. Well, I guess you have to work a lot to be able to afford the rents,
Exactly.
even on those very, very small apartments. Thankfully, the roads have cleared and we're making good progress again.
This is the one that I'm talking about.
Oh, the green one,
The
165.
green
British Racing Green. That used to be the traditional colours of motor racing cars from the UK. British Racing Green is the name of the colour. Maybe that's, again, a throwback from the time of British influence here.
Martin, let me ask you this, because you've traveled a lot of cities, that's right? And to me, it seems like all the cities are more or less the same right now, or getting more and more similar to each other.
Do you know, that's sadly true. You could almost go anywhere in the world, and once you're in the main central business district or in the main shopping street, I think it's a kind of creeping Americanization, really. I mean, you're right. And of course, the stores are familiar, which is reassuring in a way, but it's, yes, you have the same chain stores, the same big names now in just about every city of the world.
Right.
But you talked about the side streets and the small alleyways, and I think if you take a little bit of trouble and just walk a little bit off the beaten track, you can still find the individuality of each city. I mean, yes, so the very, very centres are very, very similar, but I suppose that's convenient because you know where to buy the things that you need to live and to carry on your life. But yeah, just a little bit of effort, and I think every city has its own rewards. My hometown for the last 5 years has been Bangkok in Thailand. That's where I normally work. I'm here for this celebration. But Bangkok itself is the same, the very centre of Bangkok. So many shopping malls, air-conditioned shopping malls, bright lights, familiar names that you see in any place anywhere in the world. But of course, as soon as you step outside into the sweltering and the clammy, muggy heat that you often have in Bangkok, they have food stalls, they have individual little stalls at the side of the road. So that's the very thing that's... Bangkok is very famous for its street food culture. Right. But here, of course, it's the same thing, but it's famous... I mean, really, Hong Kong is very, very famous, of course, for its tailor shops. There's an entire district of Bangkok. To be honest, I think a lot of them are on the Kowloon side, where I guess in days gone by the rents were a little cheaper. But there's this great tradition of tailor shops in Hong Kong, and they work very quickly, but they'll make you a very good suit. They're not as cheap as they used to be. They're a little bit more expensive now. You could probably get a suit for $100 not too long ago. Now it's more like $500, $600, $700. But they're famous for the fit and the amount of care that they put in. And here in Hong Kong, if you go to one of the better shops to have a suit made, they will take at least 30 to 35 different measurements. It's not just an approximation. They literally measure every part of your body. And they measure the width of both arms, because your arms might not be exactly the same. They don't just measure one arm and make two sleeves the same.
So particular about
if it's a bespoke suit, I didn't know this before, made to measure, I think is a basic pattern adjusted to fit you. But bespoke means it's literally created entirely for you. And these are the suits I'm talking about. These are the ones where they take all of these measurements, and the suit is actually crafted to fit your body. And Hong Kong is very famous for that.
And you know this because?
I know this because I went to a traditional tailor shop yesterday and spent a long time talking to them, and I was fascinated by how they worked. They did say, sadly, it's a sunset industry. It's a declining industry because these tailors that we're talking about, who have this great skill, who rely on all these measurements and create perfectly fitted clothing, it's like everything else. It's difficult to actually make enough money at doing that to feed a family. And so most of the tailors who are doing this work are, advancing in years slightly. And it's not an industry that is attracting young people. So sadly, unless something...
shopping malls are.
Yeah, well, that's it. The convenience of just going to a shopping mall and taking a suit off a hanger and trying it on and perhaps having it slightly altered. It's the modern pace of life, isn't it? That's taking up. Although they'll make you a suit in 4 days, but even so, of course, you can walk into a shop, and as long as you're a fairly standard size, you can walk out wearing the suit you went in to get.
Also, I was reading about Mahjong tile curving. I didn't even know that you can hand curve, carve those Mahjong tiles.
Really? They play the game with the gambling game.
Yeah. Apparently, there is still a few dozen artists who can still do that in Hong Kong right now, but it's also a sunset industry, like you said before.
Yeah, and of course, in this part of the world, there's a great fascination with games of chance. They're often regulated, and I think here, all gambling in Hong Kong, not just horse racing, it's all controlled by the Jockey Club, because they were the first ones to become involved with horse racing and on-course betting, and they've been given the responsibility to control all forms of betting here in Hong Kong.
Did you hear that sound? The ding-ding sound?
I did hear the ding-ding. That's what we've been waiting for.
The bus driver was just telling me when I got up here, she said all of the trams nowadays are equipped with modern horns.
Oh.
But they use the ding-ding.
They still use the ding-ding.
They use the ding-ding.
Yeah, you'd want them to use the ding-ding.
Yeah.
I think we're approaching the financial district, and of course that's something else that Hong Kong is extremely famous for. It was the main financial hub for Asia for so long. I mean, maybe not so much now. There are first-tier cities in China which also have very strong financial areas to them. But this was the original one, and a lot of these tall buildings ahead of us are the headquarters of famous banks. One of them is obviously HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. When it was constructed, it was the most expensive building in the world. I guess not anymore, but when it was built, this is a city of superlatives. It has the biggest and the best of everything, or at one time it did. Because again, of that small area and having to cram things in.
Are we approaching that building yet? Because I heard that building it's in a place that's got really good feng shui. How do you explain that word feng shui? I was thinking it's like something that it's like a thing that everybody knows, but nobody knows how to explain it.
I guess it's just a feeling of well-being. I mean, people who believe in feng shui believe that certain shapes promote good fortune or location
or direction.
Exactly, points of the compass. Yeah. And obviously sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes a lot of money is spent constructing perhaps a building, and somebody will come along and think there's a problem and they're not happy with the feng shui, and changes have to be made because it is something that's hugely important to those who follow those teachings. And again, the old and the new, very, very old buildings. They look a bit dilapidated, I guess, a little bit run down, but then they're next door, cheek by jowl, with modern soaring concrete and glass skyscrapers. There's a little bit of everything.
I think we're almost out of time, Martin.
Okay. Well, we're not too far from the end of our journey. You know, we talked about the bad weather that sometimes does happen here. There are a lot of typhoons. Back in 1906, there was a terrible storm that hit Hong Kong, and people tried to take shelter. But of course, shelters in those days were very basic, and 20% of the population were killed. One in 5 people died. That's the worst storm they've ever had. So, you know, alongside all the glitz and the glamour, there's still tragedy in the history of this place. I don't know if we'll get there in time. It's a shame. There's one building coming up. It would be nice to see.
That one right there.
It's the one behind, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you talked about, we keep talking about these small side streets. There is a place called Chop Alley. I don't know why it's called Chop Alley, but in days gone by when not everybody could read and write, if people, the fashion here was not to use your signature to sign an official document. It was to have a stamp or a wax seal created to your own design. That was the mark of authentication. And there's a small place called Chop Alley, and that's where they specialised in making all of these. And Chop Alley's still there, and again, it's more of a museum than a working community anymore. But it's another small facet of the fascinating history that you can find here, almost around every corner in Hong Kong. It's clouding over a little bit, but we're still okay. We're outside, fresh air, cool breeze. Well, warm breeze, but...
That building that you hope to, that you're really excited about, that's coming up?
I hope we can get there. If we look ahead of us, I think the building with the lines on it, the sort of zigzag lines going up, that's the Bank of China Tower.
Exactly.
So that's a classic building. But just to the right of it, and I just hope we get to see it as we go around this corner. So that's the Bank of China Tower, very distinctive building, but there's an even more distinctive one if we get the chance to see it. Okay, it's just coming up now on the right hand side. We can just see the sort of unusual serrated edges to the design. This is the Lippo building. You can see the name right at the top. And the architect who designed it, his vision was it's supposed to represent baby koala bears gripping a tree trunk.
Does it look like baby koala bears to you?
Well, I think it's one of those things, it's easier to see from slightly further away.
Right.
I mean, you have to have it explained to you when you're this close. But
And you're like, that's what it is.
Yeah, but when you look up, we can see the arms and the legs and the body. I don't know, maybe this was more in the eye of the beholder, but certainly I think the architect was very happy about it. Oh, and there's the High Court building. Obviously an example of the modern judiciary. That's the High Court, where all the most important legal matters are decided here in Hong Kong. Although there is a Supreme Court as well. Obviously they have slightly different jurisdictions, but the High Court, a very important part of the legal fabric of Hong Kong. Rattling along nicely now. I guess we'll soon be coming to the end of this particular journey. You can see the sea over there. We're getting back towards the coastline. Not quite yet, but we're sort of looping back towards the shoreline, having sort of diverted through the shopping and the financial districts. And of course we made that early diversion around Happy Valley so we could see the racecourse. Famous hotels coming up on the right. You see a lot of this open air sport. They're very keen on their sport here in Hong Kong. This is obviously a recreation area, but you often see open air football pitches or basketball courts. And at lunchtime, a lot of people come out of the offices and they change out of their business suits. They put on some shorts and some trainers, and they have a kick about. So even though it's very, very hot and it's very, very muggy at this time of the year, but there's a great desire to do outdoor activities here, make the most of what they can, make the most of their time when they can. Coming up on the right, this is an interesting building. These pillars and domes here of this building. That in fact is the Supreme Court building. We saw the High Court. That's the older building. That's the Supreme Court. That was actually designed by the same architect who designed the exterior of Buckingham Palace in London, which is the home of the British Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, and it's the same architect who was responsible for the exterior of Buckingham Palace who designed that. That building was actually taken over when the Japanese came here in World War II and took over the island. They took that building as their headquarters, and in the ensuing battles that followed, of course, there was fierce fighting in this district, and that is the one remaining building in Hong Kong which still bears the battle scars. If you walk around it, you can still see marks on the wall where the bullets hit the brickwork.
And behind us is the famous HSBC building that you just mentioned.
Oh, there it is, HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. Well, this is obviously a modern one. I guess it goes back to that time on this site. This is obviously a more modern reincarnation on the same site. But as I say, that's the building that was the most expensive in the world to construct at the time that it was actually built. I don't know what year, but obviously it looks like 1960s onwards, doesn't it?
And it's famous for allowing an incredible amount of light to go in.
Yes, there are so many windows. It lets in natural light on all four sides all of the time.
We're almost out of battery, so maybe it's a good idea to...
Should we wind up? Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's fascinating. I've really enjoyed this ride around Hong Kong. What did you like the best?
Just the combination of skyscrapers and back alleyways. You know, this is such an interesting city because there's such a dichotomy in the city. You know, the rich and the poor, the modern and the old, and just the wonderful combination of everything that we just talked about.
I think so. I agree with you entirely. It's that great mixture. You get a little bit of everything, and of course, because it's such a small island, it's all walkable, really. It's all in a very confined space. Well, we've enjoyed showing you around some of the sites of central Hong Kong. We hope you have too. I think we're just about coming to the end of this particular journey, so perhaps it's time for us to say goodbye. So, from me, Martin Lowe, thank you very much for joining us. Please join us again next time. We hope you enjoyed what you saw.
And me, Tao Yuan, we hope to see you again soon. We're going to be we're going to be in Hong Kong for a while until the 20th anniversary of the return of sovereignty on July the 1st. And we hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.